The rain that night did not fall on Lagos so much as it attacked. It was a violent, thrashing downpour, drumming against the corrugated iron roofs and transforming the dusty streets into frantic rivers of mud. In the small third-floor flat she shared with her sister, Amara Nwachukwu felt each drop like a hammer blow on her heart. The air was thick with the scent of damp concrete, fried plantain and fear. Her older sister, Chioma, was curled on their worn sofa, her body racked with silent sobs that seemed to tear from a place of utter despair. The glow of her phone screen illuminated the tear tracks on her face, a tiny rectangle of doom in the darkened room. "It's him," Chioma whispered, the words barely audible over the storm. "They're coming. He's coming himself." The him needed no explanation. For weeks, Chioma had been a ghost of herself, jumping at shadows, staring blankly at walls. A foolish venture into online luxury consignment, fueled by envy and Instagram dreams, had gone catastrophically wrong. The initial loan from a seemingly friendly financier had spiraled, the interest rates morphing into impossible numbers, and the collectors had revealed their true faces. They were not local area boys. They were connected, a tendril of a vast and cold organism known to only a few in the underworld. The Kim Syndicate. Korean, efficient, and renowned for a ruthlessness that was both clinical and absolute. Amara moved to the window, her bare feet cold on the cement floor. She pulled back the thin lace curtain. The narrow street below was momentarily deserted, washed in the orange haze of a flickering street lamp. Then, as if materializing from the rain itself, the black SUV appeared. It was a Mercedes G-Class, a hulking beast of polished steel and darkened glass, so out of place in their cramped neighborhood it looked like a spaceship that had landed. The engine cut, and the silence that followed was more terrifying than the roar. The front doors opened first. Two men emerged, tall and broad-shouldered in exquisitely tailored suits that did nothing to hide their lethal purpose. They scanned the area, their movements synchronized. Then the rear door opened. Park Min-jun stepped out, and the very atmosphere seemed to shift. He did not hunch against the rain. He wore it like a cloak. His overcoat was dark wool, his hair jet black and perfectly styled despite the weather. Even from this distance, Amara could see the sharp cut of his jaw, the unnerving stillness of his posture. He did not look up at their building. He simply observed it, as a surgeon might observe an operating theater, before giving a slight, almost imperceptible nod to his men. This was no errand boy. This was the king. And the king had come to collect. The knock on their door minutes later was not the aggressive pounding of thugs. It was 3 precise, firm raps that echoed through the flat with a dreadful finality. Chioma whimpered, shrinking into the sofa. Amara's blood turned to ice, but a fierce, protective fire ignited in her chest. She was the planner, the pragmatist, the one who had worked 2 jobs to keep them afloat after their parents passed. She straightened her spine, smoothed her simple Ankara wrap dress, and walked to the door. Taking a deep breath, she opened it. He filled the doorway. He was taller up close, his presence an avalanche of quiet authority. His eyes, a dark, unfathomable brown, swept past her into the modest room, taking in the faded fabric, the second-hand furniture, the evidence of a life lived on the edge of scarcity. His gaze held no mockery, only a chilling assessment. It finally landed on the cowering form of Chioma. "Chioma Nwachukwu," he said. His voice was lower than she expected, smooth, with a soul accent that polished each syllable into a cold gem. "A debt of 50 million naira. Your grace period has concluded." Chioma stumbled forward, falling to her knees on the rough mat. "Please, please. I will get it. Just 1 more month. I have a line on a job, I swear." Her pleas were a frantic, broken melody. Min-jun did not look at her. One of his men took a step, but Min-jun raised a single finger. The man froze. The king's attention had drifted, settling on Amara. She stood her ground, her chin lifted, her hands clenched into fists at her sides to hide their trembling. She met his stare, pouring every ounce of defiance she possessed into her own eyes. She would not beg. She would not look away. For a long, suspended moment, they were locked in a silent battle in that cramped, rain-soaked doorway. A flicker, minute as the twitch of a moth's wing, passed through his eyes. Not warmth, but a spark of analytical interest. He took one deliberate step past the threshold, closer to Chioma, then paused. His head tilted, a predator considering an unexpected scent. He turned fully to face Amara now, closing the distance between them. He was so close she could see the perfect weave of his coat, the subtle pulse in his throat, the impossible length of his lashes. He studied her face, the stubborn set of her mouth, the fire in her dark eyes, the tension corded in her neck. "You are," he asked, the question a soft rumble. "Her sister, Amara." His eyes traveled from her face down her rigid posture and back up. "She is weak. Terrified," he stated, a clinical observation as he glanced dismissively at the weeping Chioma. Then his focus returned to Amara, intensifying. "But you are not." The silence that followed was thick, pressurized. He slowly raised his hand. Amara flinched, expecting a blow. But he didn't touch her. His fingertips traced the air just beside her arm, as if feeling the heat of her anger, the electric field of her resistance. "You're so tight," he murmured, more to himself than to her. A coil of wire. A spring locked and loaded. A thin, calculated smile touched his lips, devoid of any real humor. "The weak pay with money or with blood. She has neither." He dropped his hand and turned to his headguard, his decision made. Forget her. The debt remains. But the collateral changes. He turned back, and his index finger, cold and definitive, pressed against the center of Amara's chest, right over her hammering heart. "I'll take you instead." The world fragmented. Amara's shout was muffled by a large hand. She kicked, twisted, but the guard's grips were iron. As she was hauled out into the pelting rain, her last sight was a diorama of horror. Chioma's face, a mask of stunned, gut-wrenching guilt, and Park Min-jun's profile, calm and impassive as he watched her being taken, a collector securing a curious new artifact. The SUV was a tomb on wheels. Min-jun sat opposite her, a silent statue studying a live specimen. They drove to a private airfield where a sleek jet waited, its engines whining against the storm. No one spoke. The flight was a blur of numb terror. He offered her water. She refused, staring out the window at the endless black Atlantic below. What did "take you" mean? A slave? A hostage? Something worse. The jet descended through clouds, and a sea of lights resolved itself into the sprawling, ordered metropolis of Seoul. It was a different planet, neon-cool, vast, and silently judging. His home was not a house. It was a fortress of modernism in an exclusive district. Glass, steel, sharp angles, and a silence so profound it echoed. That first night, in a study lined with books he'd probably never read, he laid out the new contract. "Your sister's debt is now yours. You will work it off. But not scrubbing floors." He sat behind a monolithic desk, steepling his fingers. "My world is a chessboard of knives. I require a visible partner, one who does not tremble, one who can stand in a room of wolves and not blink. You demonstrated that quality. You will learn Korean. You will learn our customs, our etiquette. You will stand beside me at public functions. You will, for all intents and purposes, be my wife in the eyes of my business associates and my enemies." Amara found her voice, scratchy from disuse. "A fake wife. This is madness." "It is strategy," he corrected, unblinking. "A strong, composed partner is a deterrent. It creates stability, a narrative of unified power. And it binds you to the debt more irrevocably than any chain or contract." He stood and moved to the floor-to-ceiling window, his back to her, a silhouette against the city's glitter. "The alternative is simple. Refuse and the debt reverts to Chioma. The Kim syndicate does not offer third chances. Her life, as she knows it, ends. The ultimatum hung in the sterile air. There was no choice. The first lesson began at dawn. A severe-looking stylist and a gentle but firm etiquette coach arrived. Her vibrant Ankara prints were taken away, replaced by the silent luxury of Korean designers. Crisp linens, delicate silks, and most unervingly, several elegant hanboks. As she was draped in the fine fabric, the stylist meticulously tying the outgorium, Amara stared at the reflection in the full-length mirror. A stranger, elegant and austere, stared back. When Min-jun entered the room for inspection, his gaze was analytical, sweeping from her hair, styled in a sleek chignon, to the hem of the hanbok. But his eyes lingered on hers in the glass, and for a heartbeat, the analytical chill was replaced by something hotter, more possessive, before it was swiftly banked. The game, she realized, was far more complex than she had imagined. Weeks bled into a tense, strange routine. Amara was a diligent student. Her intelligence and will to survive forged her into a quick study. Yet the gulf between her nature and this world was profound. The loud, communal warmth of Lagos, the laughter, the spontaneous music, the shared bowls of steaming stew, was replaced by a culture of subtlety, hierarchy, and unspoken rules. She felt like a vibrant bird trapped in a beautifully crafted crystal cage. But in the cracks, she saw glimpses of another man. He noticed she picked listlessly at the beautifully presented, but bland, health-focused meals. He said nothing. Yet 2 days later, a new chef presented a dish called fusion soup. It was a startlingly adept version of Nigerian pepper soup, the fiery heat of Scotch bonnet harmonizing with aromatic Korean herbs. Min-jun ate his own meal without comment, but she caught him watching her from the corner of his eye as she took her first homesick sip. A flicker of something, satisfaction, crossed his face before he looked away. One evening, after a grueling meeting with stone-faced associates from Busan where Amara had to sit perfectly still for hours, she escaped to the vast, empty terrace. The Seoul air was cool and carried the distant hum of the city. She didn't hear him approach. "You did not look away when Director Park implied the shipment delay was my incompetence." His voice came from behind her. He held out a small glass of soju. She took it, the porcelain cool against her fingers. "Was I meant to?" A faint, almost imperceptible line of amusement touched his mouth. "No." He joined her at the railing, looking out. "Why?" It was a direct challenge. Most would avert their eyes. Amara swallowed the sharp, clean liquor, feeling its warmth. "Where I'm from, looking away is an invitation. Says you're prey. I've been working to not be prey since I was 16. He turned to her then, his full attention a physical weight. "In Lagos. In life," she corrected, meeting his gaze. "Fear doesn't put food on the table. It doesn't keep your family safe." She saw a recognition in his eyes and pressed her slight advantage. "That's what you saw in our flat, isn't it? Not just defiance. You saw that I was strong where Chioma was fragile. That's the real reason you took me." The silence stretched, filled only by the city's whisper. He broke it, his voice lower, almost confidential. "Strength is the ultimate currency, Amara. More valuable than 1 naira or dollars. It is the one thing that cannot be faked for long." He looked back at the skyline, his profile sharp. "But do not mistake necessity for sentiment. This is still a transaction." Yet his words rang hollow after the pepper soup, after the way his knuckle had briefly grazed hers when he handed her the glass. The transaction was developing a dangerous, emotional interest. The test came at an underground poker game, held in the private room of an exclusive club. The air was thick with cigar smoke and the scent of expensive whiskey. This was where real business was done, away from prying eyes. Min-jun's main rival, a man named Junho with a laugh like grating stone, was there. His eyes, piggish and shrewd, settled on Amara with open disdain as she took her seat beside Min-jun. Min-jun's sigh. "And what is this?" Junho chuckled, gesturing with his cigar. "A new accessory. Does she even know the difference between a flush and a straight? His entourage snickered. Minjun's posture remained relaxed, but Amara felt the minute tightening of his jaw. She placed a hand lightly on his arm, a silent signal. Before Minjun could issue a cold retort, Amara spoke, her Korean carefully practiced but clear. "Junho-sai," she said, her voice sweetly polite yet edged with steel. "In Nigeria we have a saying, the empty drum makes the loudest noise." She let the translation hang for a moment, watching his smirk falter. "And as for poker," she continued, glancing briefly at the cards in his hand and then at his face, "I know enough to see that your left eyelid twitches, just slightly when you are bluffing. You might want to have that checked. A nervous tic can be so costly." The table erupted. Not in anger, but in surprised, muffled laughter from the other players. Junho's face darkened to a plum purple. Minjun's hand, resting on the table, relaxed. Under the cover of the table, his fingers found hers and gave a single, fierce, approving squeeze. He didn't look at her but addressed Junho, his voice dripping with false sympathy. "You see, my partner is observant. Now shall we play, or would you like a moment to compose yourself?" The victory in the car was a silent, shared current. Back home he poured 2 glasses of single malt. "You made a powerful enemy tonight," he stated, handing her a tumbler. "You asked for a shield. I became a blade," she replied, taking a sip, the whiskey burning a path of courage down her throat. He moved then, swift and fluid, caging her against the wall of his study. His body was close, the heat of him seeping through her clothes. The cold controller was gone, replaced by a man vibrating with a raw, smoldering intensity. "You did," he breathed, his eyes searching hers. "But now I am the one who is unsettled." The confession, unvarnished and stark, hung between them. The debt, the contract, the whole twisted arrangement trembled on the brink of an abyss. He didn't kiss her. He pushed away from the wall as if burned, leaving her breathless and aching in the sudden emptiness. The next morning a gift arrived. It was a hanbok, but unlike any other. The jacket was a deep, vibrant green, the skirt a brilliant white, with a sash of striking yellow. The colors of the Nigerian flag, rendered in traditional Korean silk. The note, in his precise handwriting, read, "For my partner who gracefully bridges worlds." Her heart soared. But with it, his head of security, a grim man named Sung, delivered a warning. "Junho is humiliated and furious. He is mobilizing. You, Miss Amara, are now a designated target. Your perceived influence makes you a lever to use against Minjun SSI." The threat became reality at a high-profile charity gala. Amidst the glittering chandeliers and the drone of orchestral music, Amara found herself isolated on a stone balcony. 2 of Junho's men materialized, blocking her exit. "The Mafia King's African flower," one sneered. "He must be fond of you. How much do you think he'll pay to get his pretty pet back undamaged?" But Minjun's security was already in motion. They emerged from the shadows, a silent, efficient wave that neutralized the threat in seconds. The rescue was flawless, but the declaration of war was now explicit. That night, Minjun was a different man. The icy control had shattered, revealing a core of pure, terrifying fury. "Did they touch you?" he asked, his voice a low, dangerous vibration in the quiet of his study. "No. They just threatened." He slammed his palm down on his desk with a crack that made her jump. "It is the same," he roared, a rare and complete loss of composure. He paced like a caged panther, then stopped inches from her, his breath hot on her face. "This was my arrogance. I put you in the light, and the insects have come to swarm. I have made you a target." For the first time, she saw not the calculated king, but a man afraid for her. "So what do we do? Hide me away." A plan, cold and ruthless, hardened in his eyes. "We use their assumption. They believe you are my vulnerability. We will let them believe they can seize that vulnerability." He outlined a perilous gambit, a public spectacular falling out. He would disgrace and discard her, making her seem like a vulnerable, abandoned target. The bait to lure Junho into a final, definitive confrontation. The plan was executed with brutal precision. At a crowded, upscale restaurant, Min-jun staged a performance of devastating cruelty. He accused her, loudly and venomously, of leaking information to a rival. He called her a greedy, faithless opportunist. He threw a glass of wine that shattered at her feet. "Get out of my sight. You are nothing to me," he snarled, his eyes blazing with a convincing rage that, for a horrific second, felt utterly real. The entire restaurant watched, frozen, as Amara, playing her part, looked at him with a mask of shattered betrayal, then fled into the night. She stood on the rain-slicked curb, the soul downpour soaking through her thin dress. She was alone, discarded, and utterly exposed. Just as the script demanded, a black sedan that was not part of their plan pulled up sharply. The door swung open. Was this Sung's team, hovering in the shadows? Or was it Junho's men taking the bait? A strong hand grabbed her arm and yanked her inside. The door slammed. As the car sped away, she saw, for a fleeting second, Min-jun's silhouette in the restaurant doorway. His face a stone mask of anguish. It was Junho. They took her to a freezing, derelict warehouse on the city's industrial fringe. Junho was there, gleeful and vindictive. "He threw you away. Like garbage. After you stood up for him." The great Park Min-jun's pride is his own weakness. He backhanded her across the face. The pain was bright and shocking. She tasted blood. Rage, pure and undiluted, washed away the fear. She spat the blood at his polished shoes. "I will tell you nothing." Hours passed in a blur of cold, taunts, and gnawing anxiety. Amara clung to the script, to the hope that Min-jun's plan was unfolding. She focused on the memory of his hand squeezing hers under the poker table, of the Nigerian-colored hanbok, of the tremor in his voice when he said he was unsettled. Just as Junho's patience finally snapped, a knife gleaming in his hand as he advanced, the warehouse doors exploded inward. But it wasn't a SWAT team. It was a single silhouette, backlit by the harsh security lights outside. Park Min-jun walked in alone, his hands empty at his sides. The silence was absolute, more terrifying than any roar. "You wanted the weakness, Junho." Min-jun's voice cut through the cold air, calm and deadly. "Here I am. Let her go." Junho blinked, then let out a bark of disbelieving laughter. "One man. Your arrogance will be your epitaph." He gestured to his 4 men, who fanned out. What followed was not a brawl. It was a brutal, surgical demonstration. Min-jun moved with a fluid, terrifying grace. He disarmed the first man with a twist that shattered his wrist, used the man's own body as a shield against the second, and dispatched the third with a kick to the knee that echoed with a sickening crunch. It was efficient, merciless, and over in less than a minute. The final guard turned and fled into the night. Min-jun now stood before Junho, who had gone pale, the knife trembling in his hand. Min-jun didn't even look at the blade. He closed the distance, his eyes locked on Junho's. "You threatened what is mine," he said. His voice so quiet Amara almost couldn't hear it. He seized Junho by the throat, not to choke him, but to hold him immobile, a specimen pinned for examination. "That is a mistake you make only once." On cue, the distant wail of sirens grew louder. Not Min-jun's men but the police. They swarmed in, and it was clear from their respectful nods to Min-jun that they were on his payroll. Junho was dragged away, screaming about corruption and vengeance. Only then did Min-jun turn to Amara. His mask of icy control was gone, replaced by a raw, open vulnerability that was more shocking than the violence. His hands, which had just been instruments of such brutal efficiency, trembled as he cut the plastic zip ties binding her wrists. He saw the darkening bruise on her cheekbone where Junho had struck her. A sound like a wounded animal escaped his throat. He pulled her to his chest, holding her so tightly she could hardly breathe, his face buried in her rain-damp hair. "Never again," he murmured, the words a fervent prayer against her skin. "It is finished, Amara. Odette. It is gone. You are free." Back in the sanctuary of his home, he tended to her, wound himself in the soft light of the bathroom. He was meticulously gentle, dabbing antiseptic on the cut with a cotton swab, his brow furrowed in concentration. "The debt is cleared," he repeated, his eyes not meeting hers. "Truly. I will have the jet prepared. You can return to Lagos tomorrow. You and Chioma will want for nothing. A trust fund security. It will be done." The words were a door swinging open to freedom, but to Amara, they felt like a door slamming shut. A hollow ache opened up in her chest. "Is that what you want?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. He froze, the cotton swand poised in midair. He finally looked at her, and the anguish in his eyes was breathtaking. "What I want is irrelevant," he said, each word laced with a bitter resignation. "My world is poison. I saw that tonight. I felt it when he touched you. I will not let it consume you. I will not be the man who destroys you." In that moment she understood. This was not rejection. It was a sacrifice. He loved her. He was letting her go because he loved her. "What if I choose the poison?" she whispered, stepping closer, closing the distance he was trying to create. He broke. His lips found hers in a kiss that was nothing like she had imagined. It was not gentle or exploratory. It was a confession, a surrender, a desperate claiming all at once. It tasted of whiskey, of fear, of a longing so deep it shook them both. That night, the fortress of glass and steel became a sanctuary. The world outside, with its debts and dangers, ceased to exist. There was only the heat of skin, the whisper of promises against the dark, and the fragile, terrifying hope of a new beginning. Dawn came pale and cold. They lay entangled, a silent agreement hanging in the air. The transaction was over. Something real had begun. Then the knock came. It was Sung, his face grim. "Boss. Problem. Unho." From prison he managed to get a message out. He leaked files, to Interpol. Not just rumors. Fabricated transaction records. Encrypted communications he'd intercepted and doctored. His eyes flicked to Amara, heavy with a new, awful meaning. "They implicate Miss Amara. They are painting her as a plant, an international asset placed by a rival syndicate to bring you down from within. They are calling her the honeypot." The fallout was immediate and vicious. Minjun's legitimate businesses were frozen pending investigation. News vans gathered like vultures at the gates of the compound. The narrative was perfect, insidious. The mysterious, strong Nigerian woman was too good to be true. She was a sleeper agent, a weapon. Even some of Minjun's own men, those who had never warmed to her, looked at her with cold suspicion. The trust they had just built overnight felt paper-thin. Minjun fought with every resource, legal and otherwise. But the evidence was cunning, a mix of truth and lies woven seamlessly. "We need to get you out of the country," he told her urgently, throwing clothes into a bag in his panic room. "They will arrest you first. They will use you to get to me. If I run, it makes me look guilty." "It makes you look guilty," she argued, clutching his arm. "I don't care about my reputation," he roared, the sound raw and ragged in the small space. He grabbed her shoulders, his eyes wild. "I care about you. Can't you understand? I did this. I brought you into this hell. I will get you out, even if I have to burn everything I own to the ground." In his fury, a slip. A fatal crack in the story. "This was never part of the plan. Not when I realized." He choked off the words, his eyes widening slightly. A cold, heavy dread began to pool in Amara's stomach, freezing the warmth of the previous night. "Realized what?" she asked, her voice dangerously calm. "What plan, Minjun?" "The plan to take me instead of Chioma." Was that just another business calculation? He looked stricken, as if she had struck him. Amara, he began, his voice pleading. Tell him, she demanded, the force of it echoing off the steel walls. He released her, his shoulders slumping as if under a physical weight. He turned away, running a hand through his hair. When he spoke, his voice was hollow, emptied of all defense. Taking you. It wasn't a spontaneous decision in that apartment, he confessed to the wall. I had seen you before. Months ago in Lagos. I was there for a preliminary deal. I saw you at Balagan Market. A corrupt official was harassing a yam seller, demanding a bribe. You stepped in. You were fearless. You cited city bylaws to him, your voice clear and sharp. You shamed him in front of the whole market until he slunk away. He finally turned to face her. His eyes filled with a profound shame. I had never seen such fire, such pure untamed strength. I couldn't look away. He took a ragged breath. When Chioma's file, with her family details and your photograph, landed on my desk weeks later, I saw a path. The debt was real and she could not pay. But the choice of collateral, that was mine. I took you because, from the moment I saw you in that market, I wanted that strength near me. I wanted to understand it, to possess it. It was selfish. It was calculated. It was wrong. He finally met her gaze, baring his soul. The beginning was a lie. The truth was a physical dissolution. The floor seemed to drop away. Every moment. His initial interest, the training, the shared glances, the kiss, was retroactively poisoned. She had been selected, not seized. A target of opportunity long before the rainstorm. The betrayal was so complete, so foundational, it stole the air from her lungs. Get out, she whispered, the words scraping her throat. Amara, please. What we have now. Get out. He left, the heavy door sealing shut behind him, leaving her in a silence more absolute than any prison. She was trapped between a legal system that wanted to cage her and a man whose love was sprouted from a bed of manipulation. She thought of Chioma, finally safe and starting over, oblivious to this deeper horror. She thought of the man who, despite his poisoned beginning, had just offered to burn his world to ashes for her, who had looked at her last night not as a possession, but as a salvation. Hours ticked by on the digital clock. The sirens were getting closer. She thought of the market in Lagos. She hadn't been strong for glory. She'd done it because it was right. She thought of what was right now. Letting him destroy himself for a lie. Letting Junho win. She stood up, her legs shaky but determined. She opened the panic room door. He was in his study, sitting in the dark, a statue of despair. I have a plan, she said, her voice steady in the gloom. But it requires you to trust me completely. And it requires you to tell me everything else. No more secrets. No more calculated beginnings. We burn it all down, or we build something true from the ashes. Your choice. The plan was audacious and dangerous. Min-jun, in his years at the top, had maintained a digital insurance policy. Encrypted files detailing not just his own operations, but the corrupt ties between the syndicate, certain politicians, and, crucially, a high-ranking official within the Korean branch of Interpol who was on Junho's payroll. The very man now leading the charge against them. Amara's idea was to leak this file, anonymously and globally, to irreparable news outlets. It would prove her innocence by exposing the real conspiracy and the man fabricating her guilt. But the cost would be the total annihilation of the Kim syndicate's remaining power. It was a chance for a new beginning or mutual ruin. As Min-jun input the final commands on a slim, encrypted laptop, his fingers flew over the keys. Upload initiated. The data will burst to 12 major outlets in 30 seconds, he said, his voice tight. At that moment, they heard the crash of the front door being breached downstairs. Shouts in Korean and English. Interpol. We are armed. They ran from the study toward the panic room. The upload screen flashed. Data stream live. 25 seconds to transmission. They were at the panic room door when an agent rounded the corner, his gun raised. Freeze! Time slowed. Amara saw the agent's finger tense on the trigger. Min-jun, without a second's hesitation, shoved her behind him, putting his own body between her and the barrel. The gunshot was deafening in the enclosed hallway. Min-jun grunted, stumbling back into her, a dark, blooming stain spreading high on his shoulder. But his momentum didn't stop. With a guttural cry, he lunged forward, using his good arm to deliver a vicious, disarming kick to the agent's wrist. The gun clattered away. They fell into the panic room, and Amara slammed her palm on the close button. The thick steel door hissed shut just as more agents reached them, sealing them in with the blaring alarm and the coppery smell of blood. In the red emergency light, she pressed a wad of fabric from her shirt against the wound, her hands slick and trembling. "You idiot! Why did you do that?" she cried, tears of fury and terror streaming down her face. He winced, his face pale, but managed a weak, pained smile. "A life for a life," he gritted out. "I told you. I burn it all for you." On the room's monitor, chaos unfolded. News alerts began to pop up like digital fireworks. Corruption scandal rocks Interpol. Kim's syndicate implodes, exposing high-level conspiracy. The agents outside their door were suddenly receiving frantic calls, their expressions shifting from aggression to confusion, then to urgent retreat. The siege was lifting. The truth was their cavalry. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind of legal proceedings, hospital visits, and exhausting testimonies. With the corrupted official arrested and the fabricated evidence against her thoroughly discredited, Amara was fully exonerated. Min-jun, his illegal empire publicly dismantled by his own hand, stood trial only for specific, non-violent financial crimes. The judge, acknowledging his cooperation in uprooting deep corruption, sentenced him to 2 years of house arrest and staggering financial penalties. The Mafia king was dead. In his place stood Park Min-jun, a man stripped of his power, but finally free of his past. On the terrace of a modest, sun-drenched villa in a quiet Seoul neighborhood, a world away from his glass fortress, Amara watched the cherry blossoms drift on the spring breeze. He found her there, his arms still in a sling, his movements slower but his eyes clearer than she had ever seen them. "The doctor says the scar will be minor," he said, leaning on the railing beside her. "He also says your quick thinking likely saved the use of my arm." "We're even then," she said, not looking at him, watching a petal spiral to the ground. "We will never be even, Amara," he said softly. He turned and with some difficulty, lowered himself to one knee on the terrace tiles. He did not present a ring. From his pocket, he drew a small, weathered wooden statue. It was an Nkisi figure from the Niger Delta region, its surface worn smooth by time and touch. A traditional symbol of pact, oath, and healing. "I built my life on lies and strategy. You walked into it and demanded truth, even when it shattered you. You saw the man behind the king and offered him a chance to be something more." His voice was thick with emotion. "I have nothing left to offer you but this man. A man who loves you with a depth that terrifies him. A man who will spend every single day of the rest of his life earning the trust he broke. Will you build a new life with me? A true one?" Amara looked at him, at the man who had seen her strength and coveted it, who had manipulated her and then fought for her, who had lied to her and then bled for her. The past was a debt they had both paid in blood and tears. The future was not a transaction but a choice. Slowly, she reached out and took the Nkisi statue from his hands. Its wood was warm. As her fingers closed around it, her phone, resting on the table beside her, vibrated with a sharp, intrusive buzz. She glanced at it. A message from an unknown number. It was a photo. Chioma, laughing, her arm around a new friend at a Lagos beachfront cafe, looking happier and healthier than Amara had ever seen her. A wave of relief washed over her. Then she read the text beneath it. "Clean slate is a beautiful thing. But the past, little sister, casts long shadows. You should ask your Min-jun about The Jakarta incident. Some debts, it seems, are not so easily forgiven by everyone. Sleep well, friend. The screen went black, reflecting their two faces, hers frozen in dawning horror. His initially soft, now hardening into a mask of sudden grave apprehension. The blossom-laden breeze felt cold. The peaceful silence of their new beginning was shattered by the whisper of a past they had not yet conquered. And so, just as the dust begins to settle and our lovers grasp for a fragile peace, a shadow from the past stretches across their threshold. Who is this friend? What terrible secret lies buried in the Jakarta incident? A secret Minjun has still not shared. Is their hard-won love strong enough to survive when the foundations are shaken once more? The story of Amara and Minjun is far from over. The next chapter promises deeper secrets, greater dangers, and a test of trust that will push them to the brink. If you must know who sent that message, if you believe a love born from deception can withstand the truth, then you cannot look away. Subscribe now and tap the notification bell. Your support is the signal that brings their continuing story to light. Don't miss a moment of the storm to come. Subscribe.